So Alibaba yesterday or the day before, they had their big rah-rah kind of like conference and they announced all of these new models across WAN and Qwen and a $50 billion kind of re-up of investment into this area, both across their cloud computing and their model investment, right? And this is why it's relevant because these guys are absolutely going for it. Some of these models are pretty exciting. Did you see any of it or go through any of these?
I saw that there was an Omni model, like a everything. But when you say models,
Yeah, so if you want to
I guess I don't
see
know about, maybe I don't know about some of them.
like, I don't know who was managing their social media account, but they were working overtime, like on their X account the other day, just like bang, every 2 minutes there was just something going out on there. So I'll bring that up so you can see all the different models and then we can go into the Hugging Face thing. One of the greatest things is these are mostly all kind of open models, right? I think probably the most exciting ones for me was the WAN 2.25 or Flash 2.2.2 Flash, which is like a competitor for like VO3, and then this Omni model. So if we want to chat about those, I might just show you my screen.
Are you typically using the Qwen hosted, Alibaba hosted version or API or like Open Router?
I When I have played with these, I've used it on Model Scope on the which is actually very good. I found that's the Alibaba Cloud kind of model garden, kind of like AI Vertex, like Vertex for equivalent like Google Cloud, but for Alibaba, which I can bring up and show you. But if we go to Qwen, and so the lab is called the Tongi Lab. Yeah, here we go. This all came out. So yeah, there's this very, very large model. So that's the vision language model. Then there's Qwen 3 Max, which is this massive, trillion parameter model that they've got. I don't know, like I was looking at some of the benchmarks and that. I'm not exactly sure how relevant that one is. But then, yeah, Qwen 3 Max to talk about. I wasn't actually that interested in that one. This one is basically like, yeah, a vision model, which is sort of like visual agents operating phones, those sorts of things, operating kind of computer use, and then coding as well. It's said that it like performs really well on that. Then there's this model, and then there's a couple of custom versions where there's like a travel planner equivalent and a couple of agentic kind of like, it's almost like demos that they built, which they kind of claimed were well as part of the release. But they just look like demos. Yeah, an upgrade of Qwen 3 Coda as well. Live translate model, so real-time multimodal live translation and visual. Like so multimodal, and then travel planner, where is this thing? Yeah, they released like equivalent of Llama Guard, like Qwen 3 Guard, like moderation rule set or moderation
Guardrails.
guardrail model, an image editing model. Yeah. Here it is. Qwen 3 Omni, basically native end-to-end multimodal. And I looked at it on Hugging Face. It's just like any to any, like anything in to anything out. Open sourced, built-in tool calling, 30 minutes of audio understanding. Yeah, it's just very impressive. Like, this is the model scope platform that they use, and here is the Hugging Face collection on this. So interact with multimodal chatbot using text, audio, images, and video. Yeah, it's just really impressive what these guys are doing, all out in the open.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Alibaba and a lot of the Chinese firms, they have some limitations on compute essentially, right? So it seems like they're going really deep on specialized type of tasks. And then this Omni model, I mean, I guess I don't fully understand I haven't read up on the architecture, but it's almost like a model router where it's actually like a bunch of these specialized models under the hood, maybe.
I actually think, sorry, I just got to translate this. This is model scope. Usually I've got a little bit of a translate kind of thing. Here we go. I don't know if that's exactly correct. There's constraints on the chips that they get access to in order to train, right? That's like US embargoes on specific chips. They've obviously been able to get around a fair bit of that over time, but it's not at the scale. They're not building like a Colossus scale or like some of the NVIDIA OpenAI kind of announcement where they're like, all right, this is $100 billion kind of commitment to each other, a multi-year thing, building multi-gigawatt like data centers using Blackwells and whatever's coming next. But they have been able to really crack, like I said on previous shows, specific applications where they've got a better data kind of base, like a base of kind of training data to work with, like any of the models that had come out of ByteDance. But a lot of these models are general purpose in nature, and it seems like Alibaba is probably one of the better ones. They're also setting up like these models, these Qwen models. They're also setting up Alibaba as kind of like the AWS for Asia. They talked a lot about, like, because it was an Alibaba kind of announcement day, they talked a lot about the growth of their cloud business. And so a lot of it, I'm assuming, is like investment in inference, is that $50 billion thing. Despite the fact that they can't get access to these really high quality chips, quote unquote high quality chips, they are accelerating, right? It makes me think like how critical are these next gen chips? Like maybe it will be that like they never, like what we talked about last time, they just never catch up because of that technical constraint. Or maybe they
Mhm.
will through these kinds of initiatives that they've obviously been able to implement accelerate enough through technical innovation under the hood, which is what the DeepSeek moment was, to basically remove any competitive edge that the hardware might provide. It's an interesting
Right.
kind of way to play it out into the future. But these, yeah, this here it is, Omni.
Yeah,
Where's
when I hear
Omni?
about the amount of money that it takes, like OpenAI and some American firms versus Chinese, it gives me this impression that we're just like, I don't know, in my head, like sloppily just slamming things and just consuming tons of compute where they are being more like surgical, I guess. That's just kind of my impression. And I don't know if that's totally true, but there has to be some truth in that because the things that they're doing with far less resources is insane.
It is. I don't know the answer. I know like Semi-Analysis, the blog that follows the semiconductor industry, talks about this a lot around like the competitive tension. I was actually surprised by, so you know Colossus, the training center that did Grok 4. I was quite surprised by how small that actually was in terms of capital and actual energy consumption. Like everyone was talking, it made a lot of noise. Everyone was talking about it as if it was like this crazy thing. And it was a very significant technical innovation based on everything that I read about. But actually, it wasn't that much money. I think it was somewhere between like $500 million and $1 billion. And then about the equivalent energy consumption for the training run, I believe, was somewhere in the order of like what the equivalent of 4,000 homes or a town of 4,000 people would consume over a year, which in the context of like all of the headlines and stuff around like energy use, probably not that much. Now, in the West, it seems most of what we're spending money on is on inference, right? As all of these things just explode into every single corner of Google, Meta, and AWS and every other kind of software product around the world. I think that's where most of our money and the capital is going, right? So yeah, I don't know if it's any different for these guys, to be honest, based on what some of the announcement from that Alibaba kind of demo day was. All right,
Well, I can tell
I
you,
really,
the Qwen models are my go-to when it comes to, I'm primarily using them like local, not necessarily these larger models, but even through Open Router, or if I'm going to use a open source model, I typically will go for the Qwen series. So I'm excited to check this out, especially the Omni. And I think I even mentioned to you I was putting together like a vision model using Qwen to give other models that like the GPT OSS models that don't have vision, like combine them together. So this is right along those same lines, really.
right, okay. So that's interesting. So you use, say, Qwen 3 Coda over GPT, or is it, when you're using it locally?
Yeah, I think the GPT OSS models are actually really good, especially when it comes to tool calling, but they don't have vision capabilities. So of course, I did it through an MCP server. I just created an MCP server that if you upload an image, instead of saying, hey, I can't handle this, it passes it to Qwen 2.5 VL, I think was their private
Yeah, the
list, the
vision
most
language.
recent
Yeah, the vision model. Yeah.
the vision. And then I have a lot more flexibility on like how do I want it to describe the image. And I think it actually works pretty well. And then I also have OCR capabilities in that. So for me, when I'm coding and things, I rely on screenshots a lot. Like I take screenshots all day long, drag and drop, drag and drop. So if I'm
Well,
missing that, if I don't have that capability, it's a big gap. So that's kind of what led me to do that.
well,
And I like talk about privacy and things like that. So there's some potential privacy implications there as well.
Yeah, just on that. So the thing I want to demo for you in the web dev section later on the demo, not only is it the MCP server for Figma, which has been around for ages, is the Chrome DevTools MCP server. That thing is great and removes all of that shit. Like I'm just like fucking constantly just going back and forth and saying, okay, check your work. Oh, I have to check this thing. I was like, this is nuts. And now it's just like, all right, Chrome DevTools, like Claude's just like got it. You can just push it over there. Like it's great. I've been using it for the
Yeah,
past day
I've
or
actually
two.
started using that one. That one and Playwright are part of my standard tool set now.
Yeah, Playwright wasn't as good for me, and then there was a Puppeteer one as well. I was just like, it's not as good. But I just like the fact that because I'm familiar with Chrome DevTools, we're getting off topic here, but anyway, like Chrome DevTools, like that is my kind of debugging suite. So now I can like, it's sort of like you can communicate with it as if like I was actually just getting something out of there and then sending it to a dev. Like, yeah, I'm keen to get your
Yeah,
thoughts on it and show and just demo it, I think. So yeah, you should try out this Omni model. Like that's pretty mental that this is just like all of these component parts and that it's all built into some sort of combined like model. So they've got the architecture here. There's like a mixture of experts thinking model and then the mixture of experts talking model that communicates, basically communicates with each other. And then obviously output components if you're streaming, video, audio, all those sorts of things, which we talked about last week around the codec, around like encoding and decoding for different outputs. The fact that you can bring in, these are all of the use cases just in one model, right? Like, so speech recognition in audio, speech translation, music analysis, sound analysis, audio captioning, mixed audio analysis of content, such as speech, music, and environmental sounds. Then visual, so OCR, grounding objects, in visual grounding of objects, asking questions about images, image math, video descriptions, video navigation, video scene translation, audio to visual, like audio visual question and answering, visual interactions around like, model using visual inputs and audio inputs,
yeah, man, this is
dialogue.
crazy.
And
Do
then,
they have any
yeah,
comparisons here of, say, like transcription comparing to the Whisper models, or even like the OpenAI ones? Like, do they have
yeah.
a breakdown of each capability somewhere?
Let's check out this. This is the technical report. We might be able to see if there's some in here. But this is tough because usually there's no, like, we usually have to wait like for an independent group. Like that's why I like the meta definition benchmarks from artificial analysis, but usually you have to wait because every time you read this, every time you read something like this, it says outperforms on the key benchmarks, and you're like, great. Like remember Llama 4 was like outperforming on key benchmarks, and you're like, yeah, who's using Llama 4? Let's
I
try.
actually used it the other day, experiments. I forgot or didn't realize it's like, I think it has 2 million context windows, 2 million.
Yeah, I shouldn't talk down about Llama 4 as much. I know it is used. So, for example, when we did the overview of Rock Compound, they do use it in there apparently. So it is used, but I guess the meta point is like no one will ever release a model and say it doesn't reach SOTA on something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Benchmarks.
Do you know anybody who primarily uses, like anyone who would see this come out and now that's all that they're going to use? So I think you and I were, as much as we enjoy the open source and appreciate the open source stuff, primarily are using state of the art models, right? Like, I wonder how many people there are who are actually 100% of the time using these open source.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are lots of places where models that don't come out of the West are really relevant and useful. For example, if you want to build like a translation of like a real-time video translation app from Arabic to Italian, then maybe, I don't know, maybe the Google models are good, but maybe one of these models is better. There is also like with something like this, like when these really true like omni model, like, anything to anything models become available, this is open source, right? This could enable, say, a class of startups and apps and products that kind of weren't necessarily able to exist before, particularly if you can't control the infrastructure. So if you are required to control the infrastructure in a certain context, I'm thinking maybe like critical infrastructure or self-driving or on device or whatever, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to use like the closed model from Google that may be able to execute all of these things. So that's another part. The other factor is I think there's a hidden category of company that does fine tune to use cases using a lot of these. So, for example, I met a guy who worked at a hedge fund that just did quant trading, and all of their models were fine tuned on top of the Qwen models. And that was about 6 months, 12 months ago. So, there's a category of those. I think they're not necessarily tech companies because they weren't releasing a product, but it's like it's a category of, I guess, AI and AI engineering that exists. That's sort of like a hidden layer that I think is powered by a lot of these things.
That's a good
So
point. Yeah, I
that's a
wasn't even
solid
thinking about
maybe.
the fine-tuned.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I just said that's a good point. I wasn't even really thinking about fine-tunes and customizations.
Yeah. So here is a Omni Flash comparison on a bunch of these different benchmarks, of which a bunch I've never heard of. Well, some of them I have, but yeah. So these always come out, and generally they'll pick and choose the ones specifically. Like here, they're comparing to GPT-4o, which doesn't really make any sense because GPT-5 is out. I think probably for these models, it's harder because they're open, but you'd probably need to compare some of them to like open source models. But they do compare, say, this to, say, Gemini 2.5, Gemini 2 Flash or 2.5 Pro or 2.5 Flash, for example, across some of these things. It may be because they didn't have the benchmarks available. Yeah. So, and generally, whenever they put a chart up like this, it will always show that they're outperforming on something. The only other one I want to mention before we get off Qwen is the WAN models. 2.2. So these are Alibaba again, when they call it WAN for some reason. And this is a text to video model to compete with, say, VO3, where they generate not only the video but also the sound, and then there's multiple generations, different turns, bunch of different functionality. Components are, I believe, open source, so you can go and roll these models yourself, and they've already started rolling out this update into things like Comfy UI. So that's why I want to go and try it out. But apparently it's excellent, cheaper, open source compared to, say, the VO3s of the world, even compared to, say, VO3 Flash, which came out as recently as well, which came out a while ago. This is the only one that I use. And yeah, so here's the comparison against some of these core models. Although there's a new version of Kling 2.5 out, so everyone's trying to move in this space. Sora, I'm not surprised that's lower. And Seed Dance too. I think Seed Dance, that's a very old comparison for Seed Dance, I believe. Yeah, so this thing looked pretty exciting, and I saw it was getting a lot of traction on X. So I might put this into the toolkit for my little creative, soon to be released creative toolkit for marketers, right? The toolkit that never gets released.
Nice. So this is Alibaba still. So cool.
Yeah, this comes from the same research lab. So Tongyi is the research lab within Alibaba, and then they've got the Qwen models, and then they've got these WAN image video models, the family or the names.
Yep. Yeah, the video editing model, that was like, I think at this point, several months ago, but I've used that on Replicate several times. Been pretty impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I used the WAN one a bit.
But I think that's kind of overtaken by Nano Banana now, right?
Whoa, that's pretty cool. These examples are rad. Yeah, so who's moving to China? Do you want to go and work for Alibaba? They're definitely going for it, so it's pretty impressive to see. I think competition in this space is great. So if anything, the proof will just be it'll push the Western tech companies to go harder, I think.